Hi guys, good morning. In this video series, we are going to build one of our applications which will be on payment related domain. And then every series, or let's say in every day, we'll be having a minimum valuable product, MVP. Okay, we'll be having features in that way, and then we'll be developing from beginning to the end of what actually we need to do to have that feature complete. Okay, so let's get started with bootstrapping one Spring Boot applications and having a user add feature. Okay, so mm, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use IntelliJ and then the Spring Initializer. Okay, so this way we can quickly bootstrap the Spring Boot applications with all of the dependencies that is required for us. So I'm going to have one name for now, which is the Eagle Sur, which is the name that I like, and then payment applications for now. So we're using Maven, Java 11, and this. So using the Spring Initializer, we can add all of the tools that is needed to bootstrap our application. So I'm going to add the Lombok, which will help us to add the boilerplate code. We'll discuss about this later. For now, let's simply add it, and then the Spring Web, which is the web components. Okay, so uh, I added this dependency, and then as a template, we don't need anything. We're not going to add the security for this version, and then in SQL, yes, we need to persist it. So let's simply add the Spring Data JPA. Okay, and also what we can do is like if there is any a validations tool, we can add it as well. So security, no, where is the validation? So let me search for the if there is any, yeah, IO validation. So what is this? Oh, yeah, we can add this event validator. So it will also help us to do the thing. So basically, what we added is like we added Bloomberg and Data Jpa, we Spring Wake and the validations. Also, we can add the database. Okay, so S2 is pretty easy and pretty simple to get started with. Okay, so let us add the S2 database, which is in-memory database. So doing this, we have added all of the dependencies that is needed for us to get started. So simply let's get started on this applications. Okay. So basically, this is the code that has been already generated for us. It has the packages and then it has the payment applications and some templating and then maybe dependencies, this and that. So let's start adding some packages to this bootstrapped applications. Okay, so uh, I'll add the controller, which is the layer to read the data or communicate between the outer wall to inside the application. So I'll also add the one package is a service. Okay, so basically we're following the same approach. Okay, controller, service, and the repository. Uh, okay, so uh, inside the controller, I will start with the controller first. We're going to create the user request class, which will be the information that we want to receive from the outside world. Okay, so this is the user request class, and then also I would like to create the another user resource class, which is the information that we'll be exposing to the outside world. Doing this, what we can do is like now I want to build the user controller. Okay, so basically user controller, and which is the REST controller. Okay, or controller. So I'm using the REST controller. And the request mapping is something that we need to keep a path. Okay, so API, AP1, and users. So this is the path that we have. And what we can do is like I'm going to expose a public contract, which is the response entity, and give back to the user resource and take the user request from outside world and give the uh, user resource. Okay, so user request, and then this is the user request or user, and then the body is return null. We don't have something, or return response entity dot okay without anything for now. And if we just map this as a post mapping, annotate this with a post mapping, then what we are saying here is like there will be one controller which will map to this URL API IP1 users, and then if you are going to hit the post to that URL, then I'm going to handle it, and this is the request body that I expect out of it, and then this is something that you are going to get uh, if everything goes well. So we added this controller, and then the second thing is let's add what we need as part of our request. Okay, so I'm going to receive the name. I'm expecting to receive the name, and I'm also expecting to receive the mobile number for now. And you can also add the email or any other information that you'd like to have as part of the user creation process. So these are the simple three things that I'm adding now. And saying that, if you just do the generate and getter setters, okay, uh, we can do the getter setters. So we can generate the getter setters for this particular fields. Or if you don't like to do this or don't want to generate something like this, you can use the Lombok. Okay, so basically Lombok will do the things for us. So it will be eventually generating all of these getters, setters, requests, all our constructor, to string equals and hash course this and that. So using this data, we'll have all of this generated inside our class whenever this class get compiled. So in the bytecode, you'll see all of these methods in the class. So we're done with the request, and in the resource, also I want to annotate. I'm using the Lombok for now, so it's up to your choice if you want to use it or if you want to write that manually. It's not a problem. So in the UID, I'll give you back a UID. I'll give you back the status. Okay, so let's have the okay. So string status. I'll give you the two things to you whenever you hit this. So basically, we define the contract. What we're saying is like whenever we get the user request, I'll give you the user resource. We'll have all of this information. So we are done. So add parts of the repository, we need to add one entity. Okay, so user entity, and here I'm going to annotate this as a entity and the data exactly for that getter setters, and then I will have the primary key in long. Okay, so which is the ID and private. So what was the information? Okay, these are the three information I would like to store inside my entity. Other than that, I would also like to store, let's say, the UID, and I would like to store the status as well. We're done. So for the ID, since ID will be automatically generated, okay, so you can use the Java persistence generated value. Okay, so what else is text is like generated value, the strategy. So strategy is we can use the strategy. Strategy is generation type dot identity. Okay, so this means like the auto increment. So whenever we insert the data inside the table, this ID will be generated from the database itself. So we don't have to worry about anything about the primary key. So this is the strategy that we are using. And the name, these are the fields. Okay, so yeah, we are done with the entity declarations. We are done with the everything that is needed to store for now. Okay, so this is the first thing, and the second thing is like you need to add a JPA repository implementation. So I'm using the JPA user JPA repository. Okay, which will be an interface, and then we can expand to the JPA interface, which is provided by the Spring Data JPA. So the type is user entity, and the primary key type is long. So doing this, we are done with the user JPA repository declaration, which will have this all of these methods already implemented, so we don't have to worry about anything. Now, as part of the service, okay, so I'm going to add the service, and I'll just mark this as a service. These all are the annotation provided by the Spring Framework, okay? So um, this will create one bin of type service with all of the dependencies that is required. So I'm going to add user service with required user JPA repository as part of this is processing. And why I'm doing this as a private final is like I want to have this initialized as a part of the constructor. Okay, so this way we'll make sure that whenever this guy beans is created or this guy is initialized, then a repository is always there. You have to have that dependency ready. So, and the public and the user entity create the same contract. Okay, so user and the repository that save and user. And I'm trying to return this. This is it. But while before hitting the repository, the two things I would like to do, maybe I'll add CUID. I want to generate some random UID and add it to my user. And also I would like to give him some status. So status will be created for now, something like this. Okay, I'm done with this. I'm done with this. And then the last thing is to hook up this service with the controller. So private user service, fine. And again, I'm doing as a final, okay? If you don't do as a final, then you can use the field injection as well, but I would more prefer to the constructor injection because it makes that dependency to be a mandatory if this dependency is a mandatory one. So yeah, so from here, what we can do is like now there is two things remaining, okay? The first thing is like you need to map. You need to map the, let's say, the private static. Okay, so you need to map the user entity, two entities, something like that, and user request, right? Because you need to map this request to the user entity and then call the service. So this is the one thing you needed. Another thing you needed is like private static. So user resource out of the user entity. So to resource, something like that. So user entity, something like that. This is the another thing you needed. Okay. Now the things is like either we can do this manually, okay, to mapping the every fields of the user to the user entity and then the entity to the user request. The one way of doing is like having this mapping manually. Since currently we just have couple of fields, it won't be that much problem to having map this manually. But once this field will grow, then the mapping will be so much manual, and then you have to take care of these kinds of things. The mapping, okay, we don't want to do eventually the field name will be same or something like that, so we can have some tool to do that for us. So there is one tool called mapconstruct, okay. So this guy will do that things for us. So what we need to do have just have this dependency in our class path, okay. So I'm going to include this here and then add this dependency, and then we are done. To have that dependency in our class path. This is one thing, and another thing we need is like, let me just control D, and then we also need to have processor. So let me just copy this processor. I'm not using, so if I just have this processor ready, so we have the map construct and map construct dependency in our class path. Okay. Now what we can do is like you can have the mapper, okay, as an interface. So let's say the user mapper. And then what you can do is like this is the mapper for us. Okay, so this is the map construct mapper. And then you can just declare the two methods that we had here previously. So this is the user entity to user. So copy this and then so one thing I need to have is like I want to map this user to user entity. And other thing I would like to do is like add this as a something like this. So basically I would like to map this back to the user resource from the entity. And if you have this mapper and then this and that, then you are done. Okay, so basically what you need is like you need to have that dependency somewhere here, private final user mapper, and then the so you need to again add this as a part. Or you can do using the Lombok is like all args constructor. That is what you can do. Okay, so in that case, even you don't have to worry about this because eventually it will create uh, the constructor with all of these arguments, and then this is what you need. So basically, all args constructor will do that things for you. So okay, okay. So Mm, mapper. So what we need to have is mapper the to resource once service creates the user. So mapper the to entity is a user. So this is what we need. We are done of this controller because we got the user and we map to the entity. We processed with the service, and then once the service replied, we map to the resources, and then we replied back to the things. So our controller is done. For the mapper, we have the annotation ready, so the implementation will be automatically generated by the map constructor annotation processor. So we'll see the implementation later once this is compiled, okay? And then the third thing is like that there is a user request and the mobile number and email. We are done with this, and then user resource also done. User entity, we provided the entity interface is done. We added the repository service as part of the service. We did the two things, and then so if you don't like to have this status as a string, then we can have as enum. So we can do that as well. User status. So create it, and then I can use that value as part of here. Like instead of using string user status, please use this one. And whenever you are using the enum, make sure that you say that how to store this column in the database. So value in enum type that original or a string. So I would like to store this as a string. If you do this, then status is also there. All right, and then mm, in the user request or user resource as well, you can use the same status user status. Okay, so eventually we're trying to return the user status after we hit because these are the constants. Constants are something that we can use everywhere once that is defined. So user status and then here set status user status that's created. All right, so I think we're done here. We're done with the controller layer, we're done with everything. So the last thing is if we run here it will if we run this payment applications from here it will run the applications. Okay, so I just click this payment application run and it's running. Terminal, let's check the run. Okay, so yeah, so controller, yeah, so yeah, exactly. This is something that we missed. we just annotated with a user mapper, but we haven't provided the component model. So to make this as a Spring Bean, we need to add a component model as a Spring. Okay, so in this way, this guy will uh, mark the implementation of this user model as a service or the annotation that Spring understands, and then we'll have that been ready in our class path so that the Spring container picks it. Okay, so now this is started. If you see the log, it's using the S2 database. All right, and then yeah. So to test this, okay, let's do a couple of things to see that everything is working or something like that. So I'll just stop this for now, and then I think there is Spring dot so SQL, yeah, JPA so SQL true. We can do that, and then the S2. Yeah, Spring.console enabled. We can do that like we can do the S2 console enabled so that we can just explore that S2 database out of the console. Okay, and yeah, something like this. So and what we can do is like another thing is we can include the Swagger. Okay, Swagger is the tool which can help to visualize our APIs and then send requests to them. So to do that, we can just add the Swagger dependency in our class path. So I think there is Spring Fox boot starter. Okay, boot starter Maven. There should be something like this. Yeah. So there is a boot starter. If we just include this boot starter in our class path, then there will be a Swagger also ready. All right. So we don't need this. Now the Spring Fox boot starter, which is actually the Swagger UI, is there as well. All right, so let's run the application again. Okay, so one way of just run this first, and then we can clean up few things like we can have this person as part of the properties, which is nice things to do. Okay, so if you see like the you can see the SQL as well. What is the SQL that has been generated out of this S2 dialect since we are using the S2 database, and then what is the syntax that has been created and then hit to the database. So it's trying to create the one table called user entity. So going back to our Swagger, since we are running in S0 port, okay, it's started on localhost S0 port, we can browse these applications S0 Swagger UI dot index.html. Okay, so in this way, this is the UI that we have just attached with in our applications, and then from there we can browse our controller. So this is the user controller with the one post operation that we have created, and then try it out. If I just try it out, it will give you some samples like email. Email is tsevivk2@gmail.com, and mobile number is something like 222222222, something like this, and the name is Vivek. So if you just hit it, okay, what I written is like created and then status created, something like that. So we are done with the uh, very basic the add operation of the users. Okay, so if I just want to see the S2 console, what I can do is like what is the database that I'm using? Using the SA, TSDB. So connect, no. So maybe what I need to provide is like the JDBC URL. So what we can do is mm, spring.s2 dot spring dot jdbc, sorry, or jdbc. There is a URL actually. So jpa dot url mm, spring.jpa.database.url. What is that URL? JTA platform dash JPA is the database. Okay, no URL. Okay, so what is the username that has been created? Or let's say table is, yeah, I can see there is like for now this is something like this, so I can just use this, or you can, yeah, something like this. So if you do the test connection and if you can just connect this, you'll see the tables over here. Okay, so this is the user table that we have created just, and it has all of the information that we filled up with. And if you like to hit back again and again, for example, let's say, where is the, yeah, this is the thing that we tried. And then, yeah, so for now, 2 again, and we're done. Okay, so select one. So there are two entries. All right, so this is the first thing that we have done, and if you, doing this is not complete, okay? Now we have a couple of things that we have to handle here. For example, let's say the validation of the request itself. All right, so maybe I'll just use the not null from the JavaX validations, and then not null, okay? Because now if you just provide the null, I think it will accept. So if you provide the data out of any, yeah, so but it will create but without any entries in our database. So if I see here, there will be empty null. So basically you need to annotate this with a not null, and then you can add, let's say, the any other validation as well, size, JavaX validation size, and then let's say 255 or something like that. What the text length size, min, max, let's say max 255, okay, something like that. So this is how we can add a static validation to our request classes, and then uh, you have to do one thing is like you need to say that, okay, please validate this whenever I get the request body. Okay, so in doing this, your request will be validated, and if there is any issue, it will be raised. So if you just restart this application again and try to do the same thing again. Okay, so I'll just try to hit without any data. So I will get some sort of bad request. Okay, and so it's a bad request. And if you see here, like it's getting, I'm getting the method argument not valid exceptions out of this. So if you want to catch this and then throw the errors a pretty good way, then another thing that you can do is like you can add one controller advice. So we can say that the exception handlers or something like that. So handlers, okay. And so which will expect the extend the exception handler. Ex okay, yeah. So no, sorry. This is the annotation. Okay, Control Z. Exception handler. Okay, this is the value. So this is the controller advice. This is the controller advice, and then you need to add, let's say, the uh, mm, whatever you try to do. Let's say if there is some response entity of the response. So for now, I'll just create one class called the, let's say, violation resource. Okay. So in that class, I will have the uh, private string field and private string message. Okay, so I'll just mark this as a data, no problem. And you can also do that, let's say the all ask constructor as well. And then what we can do is like, okay, so whenever the violation response, I'm going to restore the violation response on what? So handle. Okay, so this is the method argument not valid exception. So this is whenever there is this exception, then I'm going to handle in this way, invert class, something like this. So I'll just mark this as a exception handler value. Okay, so whenever I give this, give the e dot get, there are some informations. Okay, so I think it will give you the information from the field errors, so you can get the field errors, and then you can do the stream, and then you can do the map. So so what this guy will give you is like, okay, whenever this guy is mapped, okay, so I'll just go give this, get this, and then do the mapping new, mm, the violation response, okay, a dot get field, a dot get default message or whatever, and then whenever this is, so I want to collect this as a collector, the two string. So this is what I want to return, and then our response entity the bad request with this body. So if I just do this, then I'm done, because what I'm trying to do here is like, whenever there is this exception occurring in my controller, okay, this is the controller advice. So whenever this exception is occurring, please, yeah, this is the list of violations. So yeah, I can do the list of violation response as well, no problem. So whenever this, yeah, please, yeah, please do the handling, something like this. Okay, so let's restart this again and then see if this works or not. Okay, so when I go back and then hit this, yeah, so this worked. So this is the name, this is the email, this is the must not email. So this way we can cache the information and then return back to the user with all of our model validation, request model validation with just help of the controller advice. Instead of let's say doing there from here and do the validation on our own and then cache the things and then return from here through the exceptions and something like that. So instead of doing that, we can have a pretty cleaner way to adding the controller advice. And the last thing that I haven't done is like we need to add the test for each and everything. Okay, so this is a very important part whenever we do the uh, application development. So I'll start with this JPA repository integration test. Okay, or maybe from the unit test. So okay, since this guy is interacting with the database, so I would like to make sure that the way I'm defining the database and then column this and that is working. So for that, what I can do is like I can simply create one repository, and I'll say this as a ITest, okay, integration test. So again, there is a very simple way of doing it. If you just do the Data Jpa test, all right, and then sorry, Data Jpa test, not JDBC test, okay, Jpa test. So if you do this, the Spring um, Spring Data test will prepare environment for you using the S2 database. Okay, since we are using that, and then I can simply auto-wire. Okay, so private user repository, JPA repository. This is the repository that I would like to verify. So that's why I'm auto-wiring it, since it's integration test, not a unit test. And then there is nothing much to do here for now, at least for now test. So this will be just like a test for, let's say, save. I just want to verify the save, nothing much. So save works perfectly. So in that case, what I can do is like save repository dot save. I can create one entry of the user. So user entity. Okay. So if you like, you can add a builder out of here or something like that. So for now, I'm just having a very simple way of doing it. user dot set, let's say the email. I'm not adding anything, uh, annotations or let's say validation to the database itself, because normally I prefer to have this clean. Other than the duplicate, let's say the entries in our database, other exceptions than that or other validation than that, I normally don't prefer to add it in our repository layer. Okay, since we expect our repository is safe. We'll, we don't expect, let's say, someone go and then update the repository itself. So before, and this is the test, on that way our system will be more. So what you want to do is like, maybe you can just verify the that, okay, the save dot get id is not null, right? Because if this is saved, then it should have some id. It's not null. Then this is what you were trying to verify. I don't think you are trying to verify everything else, anything else. Okay. Or you can add one more thing, like I'm adding everything. So status, you can give the status, and then user status is created, and then you can check the other things as well. So for now, I'm just verifying the ID, and then we are done with the JPA test as well, which is the integration test. Okay, we're actually interacting with the actual database and then doing our repository test. So that's why I call this integration test. So the second thing is we can write the unit test for our user service. Okay, so I'll just go here and then create a test, user service test, and then I'll have one setup, and then what method you want to try the test is like create. So okay, fine. And then in this case, I would like to use the Mockito, okay, to mock the repository. So private user JPA repository, okay. Basically, basically for the testing, uh, normally this is the unit test, so we are not worrying about how the user GPA repository will work. Eventually, we'll expect that this guy will work based on the contract that it has provided towards us. So, while we are doing the test of user service, we will do the same thing. So, like, and this guy will verify user service based on the all the mock dependencies that you are using, and the based on the contracts that is using for the mock dependencies. So, for the create, what this guy is doing is like, let me create one very simple user, private, static, user entity. This is a user, okay. So I'll just return user entity, user, new user entity, and user dot set status, user status that created, and user dot set, let's say, sorry, this is not the thing I'm expecting to be set email, okay, the vector@gmail.com. I expect, let's say, user with email and the user with mobile number, let's say, which is the 22222 for now, and user with, let's say, what is else, mobile number, this, and then name, we have the name, okay, name, so name is, yeah, and return user. Okay, so here, as part of this, I'll get one user first, which is a user entity. So this is the user that I'm trying to create, so this is the user. And then what I will say, like Mockito, I'll say to the Mockito that Mockito that please mock this repository. Whenever I say the save of this user, please return me this user. Okay, what happened? Mock repository, the save user. Okay, and then return mockito.when. Sorry, mockito.when repository, the save user then return the same user, because we are not verifying the repository from here. Okay, we have already verified the repository out of integration test, and we are not writing the unit test of repository because it's basically the functionality that is extending from the JPA repository. So we don't want to verify the unit test of JPA repository, which is provided from the library itself. So doing this, whenever we ask to save you the user, please return the same user. This is what I'm trying to say with the repository, this one. And and basically you have the service. So private user service. This is the user service. So whenever I'm trying to initialize the user service, please initialize with the new user service with the repository which has been mocked. And then the repository is what? Mock it to annotations. Annotation, I think, open mocks in this, right? So please, whenever I run the every test cases, please do this things for me. So you have to set up things, you have to again mock and do the every mocking, and then you have to create new user service. So this way, this way we are set up the information. So this is the given, okay, and then we'll do the when, and then we'll then given when then. So when is like service user service that create user, and this will return something. This is the created user, and then you have to verify. Now what you are going to verify is like whenever I created the user, asset that created user, come on, that get status should be created, right? So is equals to status request status, sorry, user status that created. Just like that, you are again doing the same thing. Like normally, you are trying to verify what the service is doing. So created user, it should have the UID assigned to your user. So this is one or another thing that you are doing. So is not null. Maybe this is sufficient to verify. Is not blank or null or empty, whatever. So this is sufficient to verify your business. So we can also do the same thing in our test case method instead of saying the create, okay? So given a valid user, okay, and then when create, then status is created. So something like that. We can also write the name of the meter in the given when then as well, and then do the testings, and then we can test other scenarios as well. What happens like if I provide the empty normally we are not doing any extra processing for now, so our test case will be very much simpler. But once the business grows or your logic grows, then we need to make sure of different possible use cases and verify that from the test cases. So this is another test cases that we wrote as a part of unit test, and we also took the example of the integration test. And as part of the controller, we can do the unit test and the integration test as well, because this guy again doing the external communications, and also between the service to service communications, we can also add the integration test for that as well using the Spring Boot test. So and final thing, what we can do is like if you just initialize the mm, create test for this Spring application itself, okay, as part of this, and then okay, and simply mark as a Spring Boot test. There is advantage of doing this as well. So if we do this, whenever this test initialize, okay, it will try to have on Spring Boot application ready. So if you have any your dependencies missing, or you forgot to initialize any bin, uh, or or annotate that as a Spring bin, then this guy will catch up for you as part of the test execution process, because eventually it prepares one application context for you with all of these dependencies and bins set it up for you. So, okay, as part of the today's session, I think we concluded this session. So, what we eventually discussed today is about, let's say, having a version controller with the isolation between the the requests and resources and the entities that actually your business is working, and then use of the JPA repository. Okay, Spring Data Jpa repository, writing the integration test, and then using the Swagger and writing some annotation, automated as generated code tool as well, just like the annotation processor user mapper IMPL. If you see the implementation, this guy has created the implementation for you, which is actually the exactly the mapping that we're looking before. Okay, and the last thing is like if you want to see the example of user requests. Okay, so if you see the user request inside the target generated classes. Okay, so classes com controller user request. So now you here you will see all of these getter sessions, this and that equals everything. So this has been generated for us using the that Lombok uh, annotation as well. So the difference is like Lombok annotation modifies the same class, okay, and the other normally you shouldn't be doing that, but I'm using this because it simplifies the things for us now. Normally, the annotation processor should generate a new class, should not modify the actual class itself. So, but the Lombok does in that way. Mm, Anyway, so this is it for our first mm, applications in our first videos in this video series. So if you have any questions or any things that you want to discuss about this topic, please let me know in the comment section. And also I'm going to share this repository code inside my GitHub repository, so you can check things out from there as well. And thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Thank you.